Já, góða kvöldið og verið velkomin í Leigjandinn lífið á leigumarkaði. Ég heiti Guðmundur Hrafn og ég þáttastjórnandi og verð með ykkur hérna á þriðjudagskvöldi klukkan 9 fram á vor. Í þessum þætti ætlum við að ræða við Sebastian Bartels frá leigjendasamtökum í Berlín. En í Berlín og í Þýskalandi almennt mikil og sterk hefð fyrir leigjendasamtökum og hagsmunabaráttu leigjenda. Stór hluti eða stærsti hluti íbúa í Berlín býr í leiguhúsnæði og eru leigjendasamtökin sem við ætlum að ræða í dag með 180.000 meðlimi. Gríðarlega sterkt afl sem að tekur fyrir hagsmunabaráttu og réttindabaráttu og þjónustu við leigjendur í Berlín. Og eins og þið sjáu þá ég að taka upp þáttin hérna heima fyrir. Það vegna ástandsins í samfélaginu en vegna COVID-smits á leikskóla dóttur mína þá þarf ég að vera heima fyrir. Það eru mjög sterk lög, leigjendalög í Þýskalandi en hafa ekki alltaf verið það. Þetta hefur verið upp og ofan en það hefur verið svona viðleitni fjármagnsins til að reyna að brjóta það sem hann baka eftir undanfarinn áratug eða tvo. En leigjendasamtökin hafa sýnt mikla samstöðu og við vinna að því stöðu að efla rétt sinna umbjóðenda og almennt réttindi og hagsmuni leigjenda í Þýskalandi. En eins og segir Sebastian Bartels ætlar að vera með okkur en hann lögfræðingur hjá þessu stóru þýsku leigjendasamtökum Berliner Mietervereinen ef ég fer rétt með. En viðtal við hann tók upp hérna fyrir í dag og við bjóðum hann bara velkomin. Já, við erum hérna, eins og ég segi, stödd hérna með Sebastian Bartels sem frá þýskum leigjendasamtökum í Berlín. Þau heita Berliner Mietervereinen og eru ein af þremur leigjendasamtökum í Berlín. Sebastian Bartels, thank you for being with us and welcome.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, it was a pleasure for me to meet you and be with you. So you are represent one of 3 tenants unions in Berlin. Am I right?
No, I'm part of the director board of the Berlin Mieterverein, the Berlin Tenants Union, and we are 3 members of the board because we are such a big organization with about 180,000, so I think it's almost the number of inhabitants of Reykjavik, which are members of our tenant union. And I think without exaggerating, we are the biggest tenants union in Europe because almost 200,000 members is very, very much. And it is difficult to give a structure and to mix up politics and to give advice to all these members in a legal context. So we have more than 50 employees here. We have more than 80 lawyers working for us in the city. So we have almost 10 offices spread over the city. So you see, we are very big, and so it's very important to be a very good structured organization. So I have 2 colleagues in the membership board here, and we try to sail through these difficult, problematic oceans which lay before us.
So when are these is the union founded? When is it established?
Okay, important point. We are very old. We are big and very old. We were founded in 1888. So we are more than 140 years old. But, you know, between the wars and within the wars, it was really not the tenant union which is now existing. It was after the World War II restructured, and I think I would say we are almost grown up to a big organization since the 60s and the 70s of the last century. So there was a big movement, a social movement in Berlin. It was a city which laid down and was broken from the World War, and people came here to study and to live in a cheap way. And then things changed because the government tried to implantate the same structures like in Western Germany. You know, we were like an island here in West Berlin before the reunification. So life was easy and life was cheap here, but then things changed and we got a very strong rent increase in the 80s. So people came to us, and so we got much members in the 70s and 80s since then. Before we were a small organization.
Okay, so did the governments of Berlin, the authorities in Berlin, did they have any like big housing project, or did they change the housing policy at that time? What was the reason for this increase in the 70s and 80s?
So it was very interesting, and that leads us to the rent cap, which was implemented in February 2020, when we implemented a very strong rent cap law here. We had such a law. Rents were cut down to a certain limit, and the government said, the Berlin government said, well, in houses, there is a limit up to this and this German mark. So it was cut throughout almost 40 years in Western Berlin. We didn't had such a market for a free market for rents. And younger people cannot remember, but my colleague, he's 65, he remembers, and even me, I am 55, we remember the time when in Berlin we had such a law, and it was very easy. You just looked into the law and it said, in this house built in, for example, 1918, after this First World War, it is allowed to have 5 markets for a square meter.
Oh, yes.
And in 1987, it was abolished. The government said, we have now such new houses and good houses, and Western Berlin is almost like Western Germany. We have so many social buildings, and it is about, guys, 40 years after the Second World War, and now we have to have a free market for renting, a free market, like in Western Germany. Berlin was really, I can only repeat this. We were like an island in the ocean, maybe like Iceland. So now Western Berlin became a normal city. And 1 year or 2 years afterwards, there came the reunification of the two parts of Germany. And so things changed in a certain way, that there were houses free. The people moved to Western Germany. We had new houses. And so the market was mixed up, and people bought houses like you buy a newspaper. You bought 10 houses, 15 houses, and there was plenty of houses empty also. And
there was this culture of occupying houses. We all know about this culture, right. And this group of people who were trying to establish some kind of their own communities with their own culture and atmosphere, back in the 80s.
Yes, in Western Berlin, it started in the 80s that people, they occupied empty houses. And after the reunification in 1989, 1990, in East Berlin, we had this movement. So it swept over from west to east. Yeah. And on the other side, after a couple of years, people bought houses, as I said, like a newspaper or a car. You bought them because they were so cheap. Mm-hmm. And these guys who are now the new owners of these houses renovated it. And then they became very slowly much expensive. And in the year 2010, not 2000, but 2010, only 20 years after the reunification, the things changed very much because we had the bank crisis, like in Iceland. And now the people said, I'm owner of 5 houses, and if I sell them, I'm a millionaire. So they sold the houses, they sold and they bought it like a market. Much before, it was not like a housing market in Berlin. But now things changed very much. And so it became like an object of money-making people. And so this market was the first time in Berlin, it was really changing. You didn't find a new house, which is very new for Berlin, and it was very expensive to rent and to buy, of course.
So
and
do you
so
have these
we got
speculators, you have these financial speculators arriving in the market post 2000, around 2005, 6, 7, 8, or you have people coming and wanting to make money out of real estates in Berlin.
Yes.
But prior to that, housing or homes were not considered a commodity like a consumer product. This was a separate market always. Is that what you're trying to tell us? That the housing market did not function as a capital market?
Yes, maybe I have to add that in Germany, things are not like in Spain. They didn't have, or they don't have up yet, like a certain tenant law. But in Germany, as well as in Berlin, which is part of Germany, is a very special part. It was since till 1989, but we have also, before we had a very strong tenant law. So we didn't recognize that people were buying and buying and buying, and things became more expensive because we were covered by a very strong law. For example, there was always like a certain overview in which rents are covered not by a law, but within 5 years, you have an overview of the rents in one city. The name for that is Mietenspiegel, like a mirror, and you can Mietenspiegel, and I don't know the English expression. It's like a mirror. It's like an overview, and if you have a certain standard of your flat, you just look into, and you just have to number if you have a modern bathroom, if you have a modern kitchen or not, if the surrounding is loud or not loud, if you have got an energetic modernization, and so on. And so it is not very, it's not like you look into a law and say, this is my rent, but you can deal with the landlord about.
You have the parameters.
Yeah, you have the parameters. So, so we were always like under a certain, cover of tenant security.
Yes.
And so we didn't recognize what happened in this town, because only in, let's say, 2010, 12, 15, things really got like in Madrid, London, and landlord said, why do you you don't have to be afraid of this, because you are better in a better situation than in Paris or London. But it was not, because they just wanted to say, be calm, go to the tenant union, and you can have legal advice. But things developed in a normal way. Before we were not normal, and now we are going to be a normal city. But normal means a bad situation for tenants.
Yes.
And that's many people came to us. And so that was the reason, the background why our tenant union each year was growing about 3%. That is
Can I ask you one question regarding that? Sorry. How do you approach the tenants? Are you very well, do you present yourself well with the tenants in the media, or how do you reach out to the tenants that are new tenants moving into Berlin?
Let's say also the Tenants Union of Berlin has changed because, well, let's say up to the year 2015, we were like a little too much conservative. We just gave advice to the people, and in some situations we couldn't give advice because the landlord had a better chance to win his case. So we said, sorry, we can't help you. But then we recognized that the people didn't only want to have a legal advice, but they wanted to have a strong political movement. Like, we push you. Although we just can't give you a legal advice, we will help you to go to the politics, to our local government, to go to the media. How can you write like a media letter, and so on and so forth. And so within our directory board, we built up a certain a group with my colleagues and me. And we had a new employee being responsible for public relation. And we tried to unify house units just to give them their certain voice, to empower them, as you say in modern words, to give them empowerment.
Yes. So you were no longer only like a service
yes.
organization, but you gave them a platform for the tenants to express their wishes and the will, the concerns, and where to aim for.
Yes, we go into the houses now for about 7 years. We are going into the houses in the evenings, and we talk to them. We give legal advice, not only lawyers, but well, we have a certain idea of helping them in a political way. And I'm a lawyer and I give legal advice. It's only allowed for lawyers in Germany as well as in Iceland, I think. But the people don't want only to hear legal things, but how they can, how they can build up a strong house connection.
Yeah,
and
so to improve
also
their own, improving their own reality.
That's right. And we also move to the mayor of Berlin, or to political parties, and to the local representative. We call them Bezirksämter. It's like little unions, local governments in this big city. And we write letters, and we give interviews, and so on and so forth. I don't want to say that we did that before, but not in such a manner that we really try to build up house movements and to work together with initiatives. In Berlin, we have almost, I don't think 50 smaller or bigger initiatives. So tenant movements, yes.
Yes. So groups of inhabitants that organize themselves within some context of maybe some politics, or is it always something regarding housing, real estate development, or is it also just political agenda that people are organizing?
Well, the well-known movement, for example, the best-known movement is the movement which is in favor, the campaign in favor for the socialization, expropriation of big housing companies owning more than 3,000 units.
Yes.
And this movement is really so good organized, and they managed to win with 59% of the voters. And that demonstrates that the Berlin Tenant Union is only one player in this big city. And that is good for us. We don't want to be the only movement.
Exactly. This was a story that we covered in the last episode. So it would be very interesting if you can explain, like you said, it was an initiative based on a group of people that not necessarily were housed or located with your union, but more or less out in the field. Can you explain, because this is one of the more interesting stories in this context of the campaigns of tenants. Can you tell us about the context, the background of this huge campaign?
Yes, it was founded in the year 2016. So 6 years ago, there was a meeting in the Technical University. I was there in February 2016, and people thought, what can we do in order to make campaign building? That was a big topic. We want to have not only a representative democracy, but also a plebiscite. How can we manage? Because in the last 15 years, we had a couple of successfully plebiscites, like to recommunalize the water company of Berlin. It was privatized in the year 2005. And so it was recommunalization, I think it's called.
Yes.
The city wanted to buy them back, but there was a movement which made it easier. And then in the year 2009, there was a movement building up a strong tenant law which cared about social house building. So we had a couple of successful plebiscites. And then in the year 2016, they said, what can we do? In Germany, it's allowed to expropriate landlords to build up a motorway, a highway. So that is a practice in Germany. Each week we have a couple of houses in which the people, the owners of these houses, they are expropriated. And why not expropriate big housing companies to give cheap flats for poor people? That was the idea.
So you're saying that there is in the German legislation, there is this permit to expropriate buildings for the benefit of the public.
Yes.
It always has to be the public benefit of expropriation. Like in Iceland, there is this law of expropriation has to be for the benefit of the general public.
Right.
So you take this concept and say, what is the benefit of the general public? Is it to build always only an infrastructure, or is it to improve their housing condition or living condition?
That's exactly the point. And there's one article in the German constitution, Article 15, and was never applied. Never. It was founded with our constitution after the Second World War in 1948. And it was never used. And this group of people said, okay, we try it. We will try it. It's like an experiment. And what tried this group? They wanted to expropriate housing companies owing more than 3,000 flats in order to build up a new public organization which administrates these houses, and in benefit of the publicity to cut the rents. And to give poorer people the opportunity to live there forever, without speculation, without the aim to make the flats too expensive.
Yes.
And that was successful. And now the new government built a couple of weeks ago, we had elections in Germany and in the country of Berlin. It has to deal with it. And it has its difficulties. So, but you asked me about our part. The Berlin Tenants Union's part was to help these people going through all the houses in Berlin to go to the streets, which was very difficult in the COVID years now, and to collect votes. And you needed 100,000 of votes. And we tried to help them. And I be honest, it was a very, very problematic point, because many people in Berlin don't wanted this expropriation, because they said we had a socialist regime in the East and we had the Hitler regime, and Jews were expropriated in the 30s, in the 40s. And that is a bad, dark side of the German history.
So there's a stigma around these concepts of socialization, expropriation, possible seizing of ownership. So there are this stigma around these concepts. And
That's
it
right.
made it difficult for you to engage in the debate.
And it was also the point, that was the most important point, this ideological point. But we had good arguments to say, well, it is in our constitution and parts which is in our democratic constitution. It's not like in the 30s, it's not like under the socialist regime, because not the state will own the houses then, but the public new roof organization.
Yeah.
The second point was, en contra, the point that Berlin is not able to pay. That is about 150,000 up to 200,000 new houses, which had to be paid. Well, you have to pay the companies. Right? And
so you're saying that the city of Berlin has built 150,000 apartments.
No, but if you buy them or you expropriate, you socialize them, you have to give the
minimum price.
A minimum price for it. And what will be this price for 200,000 houses? That is a very difficult point, and nobody knows. And I think you have to develop a law now, and that will take up to 2 years.
There might be an example if you want to look towards Iceland, because I think for us in Iceland, this is of course a huge, a very important lesson we can derive from you. But because after the economic crisis in 2008, up to 10,000 families lost their homes, and these were seized by the banks and by the governmental housing. We have a housing institution that lends money, or used to lend money. It's all been privatized now. They used to lend money for buying and building houses. And this institution, along with the banks, seized thousands and thousands of homes. And instead of slowly releasing this amount of homes into the market, which they always said the private market is the best to solve all of this, so why not just pouring all these houses into the market and let the general public, to buy this at a market price, which obviously will fall. They decided to sell this in great amounts to investors. So the lesson I'm saying that how would you value a great amounts of apartments to be sold to the second partner? So you could say, how much money are they willing either to lose or to accept of earning? So this would be a good example to see how did the Icelandic banks, when they sold these properties to the investors, how much was it at a market price, or was it at the capital cost price? Was it for the real cost of construction? Because there are different kinds of parameters. And do you know where the discussion is now in how to evaluate the cost of this apartment? Is there some kind of agreed market price? Is it the cost of capital or the construction reality?
No, indeed, the lawyers are not the same opinion about, but there is one guideline which is for sure that it's not the market price. It has to be a certain amount under the market price, because otherwise it would not be possible to socialize under our constitution. That is our highest court said, okay, it can't be the market price, because otherwise this Article 15 won't functionate. No. But how much under this market price? That is an interesting question. And the initiative was very optimistic, because they said about €2 per square meter. That is like a democratic price we will pay and nothing more, just 2 or 3 euros per square meter. And that really would be too less. I think it would be a compromise, maybe a political compromise. It is maybe one of the most difficult points in order to have a valid law, because if you develop a law which is kicked down by our highest court, everybody will be very disappointed in Berlin, in Germany, in Europe, because everybody looks up to Berlin. What happens there? And can tell you that we had another law which was kicked down by our highest court. That is the rent cap law. At the beginning of our talk, I told you that up to the year 1988, we had such a very regulated rent cap law. And now, 2 years ago, we tried to renovate this and came back to such a law. It was well known under the English word rent cap law. Did you hear from this?
Yeah, I've been studying this because there are initiatives around Europe and the United States which are trying to have this introduced into the market to limit or to regulate the raise in rental prices. And I've seen some initiatives, for example, from Barcelona and from Minnesota and the United States, which we have studied. They went to a similar election, state and municipality election last summer, an initiative in the capital of Minnesota in the United States, where they, same as in Berlin, they had to gather a certain amount of signatures in order to have this question voted for in the municipality election, if there should be legal ground to introduce a rent cap in the city of St. Paul. And vast majority, it was a landslide victory, vast majority of the inhabitants voted for to give the city council the permit to put a rent cap. So this is something that seems to be, there's a consensus about the righteousness of this concept.
We really need such a rent cut. But in Germany, it is up to the federal government to enact laws concerning tenant law. It is up to the federal government and not to the local government, not to the country of Berlin, to the country of North Rhine-Westphalia or Bavaria. So that was a very disappointing point that our highest court in April last year said, you are not allowed. So we have to kick down this law. You can try it on a federal level. So that was very disappointing. But on the other hand, we made up such a discussion about the necessity, and it worked in Berlin. Other people said it didn't work because the people sold their houses and they tried to cut down the market, not renting, selling their homes, and trying to cut houses in little units and to sell these units, which is very dangerous for tenants. And on the other side, the rent was really in almost 1.5 years, we had this rent cap law. They were limited, and the people even could reduce rents which were too high. That was also allowed by this law to reduce up to 200 euros.
One important question I have regarding, because now you're talking about these big rental companies, is there any law that regulates or limits the profit of housing companies that operates in the cities of Germany?
You mean like taxes or whatever?
Yes, I mean, can they just have the rent they want, and can they generate the as much profit as possible? What I'm trying to understand, as I know from the discussion in St. Paul, where they talked about the rent cap, the opponent said, if we have rent cap, this will scare off the investors, the current house owners or the investors. They are going to sell off the rental properties because they will not generate as much profit as they should or want. So this was the argument. It was always the rent cap will have the house owners, the rental companies, to leave the market by selling off their properties and then reducing the number of available flats for the tenants. Is that the same discussion you had in Germany?
Well, we have a very strong, as I said in the beginning of our interview, we have very strong tenant law in Germany, which also now says without a rent cap, we have like an oversight within the last 5-6 years, an overview about the rents. And you have got criteria for your flat in which you live. If you have a modernized building, if you have a garden, if you have a loud street, if you have good windows, a good modern bathroom and a kitchen. And if not, you can only take a smaller rent as a landlord. If you modernize the building, you can have a higher rent. And it is almost a good system, but it is not as good as defining rents in a manner of not being dependent on the market. It's like a market rent. When in a certain city, the rents are high, you have a higher rent for these criteria. You pay for a modern bathroom, a modern kitchen, a good house with garden, you pay 10 euros per square meter. If you're in a city which is not as attractive, if you pay maybe 6 euros per square meter. So it depends on all these market mechanisms.
But
so
it's transparent.
It's transparent. It's yes. Transparent. I don't want to argue against this because it's better, much better than in Spain, in France, and so on and so forth. And we have another good law on a federal, a civil law. It's only allowed to take 15% within 3 years. It's like a small rent cap. Normally
15%,
yeah, within 3 years. Increase within 3 years.
And you can do that because you have modernized the
it's not dependent on having modernized the apartment.
Yeah.
It's for every apartment, for every flat. When I move in, the landlord is only allowed to take this oversight Mietspiegel rent, which is covered. You have to look, compare. Yeah. You can compare the rent, and you add 10%. That's the limit. 10% over the tenant which lived in your flat before.
Okay.
On the other hand, if the landlord modernized before you moved in, he can take more than 10%. So that is a very weak point of this law. But in a normal situation, if the landlord didn't modernize, you are only the landlord is only allowed to take 10% over the market rent, 10%. And you can complain about it within 48 months. So you can just move in. And later on, after 2 years, you say, oh, my rent is too high and I want to reduce it backwards.
Yeah.
That's a good instrument. Without these bad exceptions, you can't prove if the landlord really modernized, how many costs, and if the tenant who lived there before paid the same rent. So there are many exceptions, many exceptions. But the law itself is a good idea. And additionally, you moved in, let's say you have been living there for 2 years, and the landlord is only be allowed to take within 3 years 20%. And in cities in which we have a very tensed market with a big tension, so the attractive cities like Berlin, Munich, Hamburg, it's only allowed to take 15%, not 20, but 15. The local government is able to reduce it from 20 to 15%. So we have a good regulation, but it's not good enough for our aggressive market systems. That's the point. We really need a better system. It's better.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but this
additional system.
For a 3-year period. The landlord can increase the rent without any reason, 5% a year.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Right.
Without
And
any
then
reason,
if,
without any reason.
all right. So, but that means that after 3 years has passed, he can do the same the next 3 years.
You always compare the last 3 years. If
All
you
right.
haven't the small private landlords, they are not eager to write you a letter for rent increasing each year. So they wait 3 years and then you get 15% increase.
All right.
Of the market rent. If the market rent reduces, but it doesn't happen in Hamburg and Berlin. No, that's
no. But who do you feel like that these big players on the market, the big housing companies, do they control the speed of this increase in rent? Or do you feel like there is this consensus because of Airbnb, because of housing pressure or scarcity, that the landlords, the private and the big companies, they can raise the rent because of the situation? Or do you feel like it is the companies that are controlling the market, that are slowly pushing the rent upwards?
It's a very good question. Let me say that first of all, our impression is that the big companies, the really big global players like Vonovia, Vonovia is one of the biggest player in Europe. In Germany, it's the biggest player. And we had a visit from the CEO, Mr. Buch, a couple of months ago. And under the pressure of our plebiscite initiative of socialization of housing, he tried to get in contact with us in order to talk. Mm-hmm. And he said us, well, do you know, Berlin Tenant Union, we like regulated markets. It seems like a contract. Why do they like regulated markets? And they say, do you know what happened in America and the USA in the year 2009? There was like an explosion. And for us, like a big company, we don't like these explosions. We like Sweden, the Swedish model. We like German model because our owners want calm, they want peace, and they want regular system of increasing rents under a very secure system. Mm-hmm. No instability. So he's, of course, the biggest fighter against socialization. But on the other hand, they can manage regulated system. And for the politics and for us, it's important to know because we are not a socialist system, and that's not anti-capitalistic to regulate the housing market. No. And to come to the second part of your question, I think they do. They have a good survey about the market prices, and each year or after having a new overview within 2 years in Berlin, we have an overview of new market prices. You can be sure if you live in such a housing complex of Vonovia or German Wohnen, you get such a rent increase.
Yes. So you're saying that the big housing companies, they like, or they say they would accept a market that is regulated, it's in balance, and it's predictable, rather than a market that can increase and generate a huge profit in a very short amount of time. This is what the word from the CEO.
Yes.
So you will say that a strong tenant law, a balanced market with a government or authorities that have the permits to interfere, this will also keep the balance. If the investors, they know that the local governments, they can interfere, they can expropriate, they can also reduce the rent, this will keep the lid of the potential increase in rent.
Yes, that's true. And what you told me on the phone this midday, I think that's interesting that you told me that in Iceland you have a very strong strong push up to a very unregulated market, or regulated in favor for the landlords. So you have to build up pressure from the tenants in order to enact laws which are good shelter for the tenants. And they would manage it. I think they would manage it.
Yes. In fact, in the last episode, we talked to Jón Rúnar Sveinsson, which is a historian and a sociologist, and he was telling us about the history of the tenants law in Iceland. There was an emergency tenants law accepted after the First World War because of crisis, and also because of fear from the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. It had an impact on workers around Europe, and the governments were afraid of uprising. So because of housing, of course, was the most important factor to keep the workers calm, balanced, healthy. So they accepted this emergency law, which lasted for a decade. Another law was accepted then in the 60s. And after the establishment of the first real tenants organization in 1978, new tenant law was accepted in 1979, has not been modernized, but last autumn, just before the election, we had this election actually at the same time as in Germany in the end of September, where the government published a bill or paper, a new law for the tenants, or improvement of the current tenants law, which did not go through the parliament. Still, they're waiting to be processed. And there are some things that we, of course, because our organization, our union, was first re-established now in November 2021. So we were not a part of the collaboration around this proposal. And we expect this proposal to be brought back to further collaboration, because now we have built up our mandate on behalf of Icelandic tenants to come forward and push through improvements in the market. There was one thing that I wanted to ask you, because now we, as I said, we are in the first steps of building our own local national organization to fight for the rights of the tenants. Where and how do you get your mandate? Because you say that you have been a service organization. Is it because the local authorities accept you as the platform of tenants? Is it because that you collaborate with the unions? Where does your mandate come from? Does it come from the number of members that you have?
Yes, only from the members and the amount of money, because we are very, very well financed. We are, let's say, a rich tenant union. To be honest,
how do you finance?
Yeah, it's only memberships. We own from a normal family. We have a membership for one person, but if you are married, for example, or a group like two students living together in a flat, not married, they only pay one membership, and it costs €9.50 per month.
Okay, monthly fee.
Monthly fee. Yeah. €9.50, and for people which get transfer money from the government, like social aid, they pay a lower price. It's only almost a half, €4.50 monthly.
So you say there's one fee per living unit?
Yes, it's very low, very low. And for this, you get legal insurance if you have to go to court. It's we have a known legal association like Versicherung, as you say, an insurance company, legal insurance company, and they will pay for you, and this fee is included in the membership. That's very important, and you don't have to pay additionally. Then they get, whenever they want legal advice, in one of our offices. We've got 9 offices spread over the town, and then if the problem can't be solved in the office by a lawyer in an oral way, things go up to our address here. Our headquarter is there are 20 employed lawyers which write letters to the landlords.
Wow,
So yeah, that's very a cool system. It is complicated,
yes.
and it's very expensive. As I said,
Yeah.
we have 80 lawyers outside, freelance lawyers, and we have more than 20 employed lawyers here. And so it is only possible if you have a high membership, and with 130,000 first memberships, and in total, like families or groups, we have 180,000 members.
Yeah, so this the front that you appear with on the behalf of tenants also
Yes.
secures the market and shows the tenant as a union front. So in order for a single landlord to raise this rent or to mistreat this tenant, they know they have to face you as a strong organization backed by almost 200,000 tenants, which must be a really great feeling and a good security for the tenants of Berlin.
That's right. On the one hand, it is a good feeling that people come and trust us. On the other hand, we like profit from the problems. I mean, it's like a dentist which profits from the root tree, bad teeth. We don't want these problems, but on the other hand, we fight for the tenants. And to be honest, you can see the problems which are higher in Berlin than, for example, in Cologne. Because in Cologne, they don't have such a rising of memberships. And even in Munich don't, because maybe the people say it's senseless because Munich is so expensive. You can't change this town. But you can change things in Berlin. Maybe it has something to do with our history, which was very, very chaotic and interesting. And as I told you at the beginning, that people here are more revolutionary maybe, and they say, I go member for the Mieterverein. I'm a member and I fight for my rights.
Yes,
and
that's a really good quote, that the consensus that is all around you in Berlin is a consensus of solidarity and fighting for your rights.
And it is important to not only to concentrate on our legal service, that's a point which I also mentioned before, but our image of the Berlin Tenant Union is also to build up neighborhoods. And I think without it, we can't make like a new image only by saying we give you a strong legal advice. That's not much enough.
No.
And but, in many countries of Germany, like in the eastern new countries like Saxony and it's Baltic Sea, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, and all these countries in which you don't have so many big cities, the tenant unions loses already. It's an important point to mention. There are many tenant unions losing members.
Yes, that's quite interesting. Is that because of the lack of faith in the...
Not only, I think the problems are smaller when you live in the countryside in small cities, because we have got a strong tenant law, and the problems are really in the big cities and in the cities in which you have many students. There are many student towns in which you have the same problems like in Berlin. You can't find a flat, it's too expensive, and so on and so forth.
Yes. Well, Sebastian Bartels, this has been an extremely interesting interview, and I'm very grateful for you to coming on the program and giving us the insight into the structure and the context of the rent-tenant unit in Berlin, which is continuously an inspiration for us. We talked about in the last episode about the election in last autumn, where the initiative, as you explained, pushed forward with the campaign of having this question to be voted for during the national election. This was a very interesting story that we are going to keep talking about, and I think hopefully we can have a chat or meet in another venue. We are going to organize a big tenant kind of assembly in March, and it will be interesting to hear your story there. It's going to be mostly an online assembly. But for now, Sebastian Bartels, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
So it was a pleasure for me, and I wish you good luck in structuring your organization to strengthen your organization. And I think we keep in contact. Whenever you want, so we can make another talk, or if you need information.
Thank you so much, Sebastian.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Já, þetta var Sebastian Bartels frá leigjendasamtökum í Berlín og við ræddum saman leigjendamarkaðinn í Berlín, hvernig byggja skal upp þjónustu samtök fyrir leigjenda, sem þjónusta leigjendur bæði við þeirra úrlausnarefni og líka í þeirra hagsmuna og réttindabaráttu. Og saga leigjenda og leigjendalaga eða umhverfi leigjenda í Þýskalandi löng og nær til 19. aldar. Hefðin mjög sterk og leigjendamarkaður mjög þróaður og skilvirkur. Og við spjöllum það hérna eftir upptökum og leig, hvernig lagaumhverfi og sterkt umhverfi leigjendasamtaka getur haft mjög góð áhrif á hegðun og framkomu stórra leigufélaga á markaðnum og hefur allt saman tempandi áhrif, og bara það að heimildir yfirvalda til þess að grípa inn í eru sterkar og mjög skýrar. Það veitir líka ákveðið aðhald á markaðnum og þessum heimildum sé ekki alltaf beitt, og það að leigjendasamtök séu sterk og komið sterk og samvinnu fram í umboði fyrir leigjendur, það hefur líka mjög góð áhrif á leigufélög og leigufélög og forsvarsmenn leigufélaga og fjárfestar í leigufélögum stórum, þeir virðast vilja vera á markaði þar sem ríkir jafnvægi og réttindi leigjenda eru tryggðar. Það er hagsmunir sem fara saman hönd í hönd, en ekki eins og hérna á Íslandi þar sem mjög mikið ójafnvægi ríkir á leigumarkaðnum, þar sem það eigendamarkaður fullkomlega sem sýnir sig á öllu umhverfi leigjenda og við hvaða hækkanir og leiguverð íslenski leigjendur búa við, sem margfalt á við það sem þau gengur að gerast annars staðar í Evrópu. Og það að renna vatnaskil í baráttu leigjenda eða umhverfi leigjenda sem koma til með upprisu leigjendasamtakana sem eru núna í fullum gangi, og við lítum náttúrulega alltaf til þessara góðu dæma sem við sjáum alls staðar kringum okkur í borgum eins og Berlín og í löndum eins og borgum eins og Berlín og Vín í Austurríki og margar borgir á meginlandinu, og svo náttúrulega hérna í norðanverðri Evrópu og Skandinavíu. Þar líka mjög sterk leigjendamenning og sterkur og stabill leigumarkaður sem hefur mjög sameinaðan hóp leigjenda og skipulagðan í gegnum sterk leigjendasamtök. Þannig að það algerandi fyrir okkar baráttu við umhverfi leigjenda að öllu leyti að hér rísi upp sterk leigjendasamtök sem sinni hagsmuna og réttindabaráttu leigjenda á Íslandi. Og við höldum þessari baráttu áfram. Ég heiti Guðmundur Hrafn og ég í stjórn leigjendasamtakanna og við ætlum að halda þessu ferðalagi okkar áfram og fræðast réttinda- og hagsmunabaráttu leigjenda annars staðar í heiminum og afla okkur fylgilags við og verið samskipti við félag okkar og fylgjast með baráttum leigjenda víðs vegar að. Þetta mun allt saman hjálpa okkur í okkar eigin skipulagi og ég vonast til þess að leigjendur á Íslandi snúi bökum saman og fylgi sér á bak við leigjendasamtökin að ganga í leigjendasamtökin, samtökum leigjenda á Íslandi á heimasíðu samtakanna sem ekki sérstaklega flókin, það bara forsíða eða skráningarsíða til þess að skrá sig í samtökin. Við erum í vinnslu að byggja upp okkar vefsvæði og heimasíðu og þar munum við náttúrulega halda úti upplýsingaveitu og reyna að þjónusta leigjendur eftir fremsta megni. Ef við minna leigjendur á að neytendasamtökin sinna leigjendaþjónustu á sínum vegum á 30 og 50 dögum. Það er þetta að hringja í neytendasamtökin og á aðstoð við úrlausn ágreiningsefna á leigumarkaðnum. En ég kveð ykkur að sinni, við sjáumst aftur á næsta þriðjudagskvöld klukkan 9 en þá ætlum við að leita fanga hjá íslenskum leigjendum í Barcelona og heyra þeirra upplifun á leigumarkaðnum þar og það breytingar sem hafa átt sér stað þannig 5-6 ár og við ætlum að ræða svo við forvís fólki í leigjenda eða hagsmunabaráttu leigjenda þar í borginni og fræðast umhverfi leigjenda þar í sögulegu samhengi og hvað hefur verið að gerast og hvað hefur áunnist á undanförnum árum. En ég þakka fyrir mig og kveð ykkur að sinni. Sjáumst á næsta þriðjudag.